Welcome to another live stream, Legends. Well, guys, Bitcoin has continued putting pressure on resistance, but we must remember that resistance is resistance until it's broken. Eventually, the downtrend will break. However, it hasn't quite yet. I will say that this is the strongest that I've seen the bulls looking in quite some time. I am taking a short position. I do consider it a little bit high risk right now. But basically, this is the first time that we've at least taken out our confirmed lower high on the trend on the 4 hour in basically 7 weeks. Other than once we did have one here that ended up being a little bit of a fake out, but very quickly ended up losing structure and then just lost the trend completely again. So basically a 7-week downtrend at this point. And this would be our most recent structure on the 4 hour that I've been interested in. Basically, we had our low, our lower low, and our confirmed lower high, the highest point between the two on the trend. And basically, that's been my line in the sand for a while. Well, I shouldn't say that exactly, but that's basically where I'm pulling my bearish Fibonacci from, right? So we are technically at resistance right now, so no matter how we look at it, things are a little bit risky right now. I typically don't like to long into resistance, and I do consider between the 1 and the 115 to be a swing fail or liquidity grab, failed auction, whatever you want to call it, basically that kind of a zone, and basically a fake out zone. And the fact that we never did break above the 115 there makes me have concerns about this, that, you know, we may be seeing weakness, even though, you know, yeah, it's nice that we did break this level. We never really got much of a breakout at all, really, at this point. So I'm still treating it like resistance. Like I said, it's the strongest I've seen the bulls in quite some time. So, and the fact that resistance already technically played out once makes me think that it's a little riskier to be playing the short again here. But I am laddering into a position anyways. I only have one order up at about 94,777 is my last laddered order into the short. And basically, if we end up breaking 95.2K, I want to cut my losses quickly just in case things really take off to the upside. I just lose confidence in the bearish position if we do end up going higher than that. And you know what? Eventually the downtrend is going to break, you guys, right? I've been bearish for quite some time now, crushing the downtrend. Every time we come up to 4-hour resistance, I've just been doing the same thing, building shorts through it. And it's been working fantastic for about 7 weeks, but eventually that downtrend will break. I'll take a loss on a swing position, and then at that point, I can kind of look at what ends up happening with the trend, because there's a couple different things that I'm going to look for in advance, just because I like to plan for anything, right? At this point, obviously, I'm treating resistance as such until it's broken, but if it does break, if we break above the 115, that's where I need to have a new plan. Basically, two ways this could go is we could break out and then just more so get a big pullback to retest the range, but I would actually be looking at longing support if we did something like that. Or at least if I was in a short position already, I would be looking at least taking some sort of a hedge long at that point, or also dollar cost averaging into spot and stuff like that, because basically if we break the downtrend, that's where I can start pulling bullish Fibonacci's finally. So at that point, I could consider doing something like that. So, erased the wrong one there. Put the bullish one back from our local lows. I mean, even right now, I would consider it, to be honest, just because we did break this level here, even though it's just very short term and it's a bit of a swing fail. You know, that is still technically breaking that high here. So I would still be willing to take a stab at some longs if we were to retest support at this point. But especially if we end up invalidating that 115 and then coming down. If we end up topping somewhere around here, for example, and come back down, I think it's very reasonable to expect some sort of a bounce out of the Stuber fib. So in that case, if I was looking to ladder into a long, I would be doing something like this, basically. So we'll have to see how the structure goes. So like I said, let's clean things up a little bit. Let's remove all my fibs. I will leave the resistance boxes for now just to keep them on our radar. But what's another scenario that could happen? Because we don't always get those pullbacks, or maybe that pullback doesn't come for months or something like that, right? So just kind of having another plan. Another thing I would be willing to look for at this point would be if we, the fact that technically, like I said, this is now a higher high since we ended up breaking this. So if we did something like this and set another higher high, then I would be looking at longing some sort of a retest, considering this is just theoretical, obviously, but if we end up getting a pump somewhere up there, then I would have my new confirmed higher low on the trend, and then I would basically be pulling a fib from there to look for a continuation play basically at that point. So we'll see if it even happens, but it's just, trying to plan ahead, because it's always best to, have a plan when the moves do come, because so many people wait until a move happens and then decide what to blame, right? Whereas if we can, yes, when we make predictions like this, we're saying, hey, we could go up or we could go down. Yes, but you are looking for certain things, certain criteria to match up, so that you can basically, you have your back-tested strategy. And if certain things align, that's when you can get into a position, right? We're not taking a position assuming that setup is going to happen. You wait for it to form in the charts, right? We want to trade the charts that are here rather than the ones that we hope appear. So that's basically, even though I feel at this point, fairly bullish, just for the fact that we, like I said, we ended up breaking this level here. But even though I feel bullish, I am still trading the charts for what they are, because if we end up absolutely nuking to the downside from here, and I ignored selling resistance and I FOMO'd long into it, for example, I would be quite disappointed in myself, because I know better than that. And yes, breakouts do happen sometimes, but more often than not, I would rather be buying support and selling resistance. I don't want to build long positions into resistance like this. So even if I'm wrong, that's fine. Eventually we'll break the trend, right? Like I said, there are a few bullish things, and another reason why I do feel a little bit bullish right now would be if I bring up the MDX Trendmaster indicator. Probably my favorite indicator, honestly, but it's not so much that I take every individual signal on its own. I don't give it all too much weight. However, I notice what direction these signals are trending, basically. Most of you guys are very familiar with that. Those of you guys who have been in live streams with me, I mean, you know that I'm always warning. If I even did it in the pro signals this morning, right? I'm warned about lower trending sell signal. That's often a bit of a reversal warning. So I was warning about that here at 110K, guys. I was warning about this signal for that exact reason. We had a lower buy and a lower sell. At this point, though, we did end up technically, if we want to look at where did we get this pivot for the sell signal, even if we go to this level up here, we have technically invalidated that sell signal, right? And even though this isn't really, as far as the signals, that isn't a higher buy signal, technically the chart is actually, because this one would have printed here at about 91.3, whereas this one would have printed here at about, or wait, sorry. Where did this one print? This would have been 91.3, and this one here would have been at 92.9 or 93K approximately. So it's a higher buy signal, right? And the fact that we also broke that lower sell signal. So the MDX Trendmaster is now giving me that little bit of a warning that, hey, we might end up breaking through resistance this time. So that's another reason why, I'm keeping risk management in mind. I have half of my position laddered up here to really pull my average entry up. So, I mean, I'm basically keeping my position small unless the perfect thing happens where I can get a super tight stop loss, right? So, basically just because I'm less confident in this resistance this time, just because it's already played out once. If we looked at this bearish Stuber here, and I know I was warning about it in the chat, in the Discord, was that, we did technically already have this play out once, right? We got 3 laddered entries, our 786, 886, and 1 fibs. And then we ended up dumping, and we did hit that 0.5 fib target. The 214 got front run, so we unfortunately never quite hit that target. But in my books, in my personal strategy, I consider that the trade has already played out once. And basically, the more we end up testing those levels and testing the resistance, the more likely it is to break out. So me personally, and I say this quite often in these streams and in the channel, that I typically like to get the first, consider it like a first move advantage, right? Just so often the market makers love testing these resistance levels here on these fibs, and they're going to test it once quite off, at least most of the time, the way I see it. They end up testing that resistance at least once, but the second time you end up going there, at that point, it's tough to say if they're going to respect it again or if they're going to push through, just because the more you tap away at it, the more likely you are to break, right? Just like the more times you're bouncing off support, unless you have a crazy divergence building or something like that. But other than that, if you're tapping away at support, it's very likely to end up breaking eventually, right? So same thing with resistance, obviously. So, and the fact that even this little pullback, ever since testing this swing fail zone here into my red box, notice where we found support on this wick on the 4 hour is exactly along that buy trend. So I don't want to completely ignore the bulls at this point. I am seeing some signs of strength, and that's why, like I said, I am willing to cut my losses quickly on my swing short position if it ends up climbing, just in case this really turns into a breakout, right? Also, I've taken some scalp shorts off of these resistance levels as well. But right now, just kind of have that swing position running. Looking at the weekly chart, this is another reason why I think we could go a little bit higher yet, is I wouldn't be too surprised to see us retest this old support line as new resistance. It's very possible we get something like that. And as well, since we got a perfect touch of the 886 and the 786 held candle bodies so far, in my opinion, it's quite likely that we test up closer to that 0.5 fib. Technically, not a super clean Stuber fib setup. However, it is still a support. I would still consider the 786, 886 a nice support range either way. Whether or not I consider it a full-on Stuber fib, it is still nice to see that support holding so far. My one concern with this, and I think I brought it up last week, I definitely brought it up on my public streams recently, is just how similar this price action looks to how the bear market basically started last cycle. Now, one thing to consider is, yeah, I know everybody loves fractals, and I do as well. However, we have to understand that fractals do break all the time. And I don't know, like at this point, I'm honestly asking myself, are they seriously going to play out the exact same market cycle on the exact same timeline and, the same structure and everything? Are they really going to make it that easy? So we're going to have to see. But so far, everything about this looks identical. Here we came right down to the 886. And then we basically went up to the 0.5 fib, like I was just kind of warning about we could still see happen. And from there, ended up dumping further to the downside. The RSI was sitting at approximately 37. The RSI for us, when we ended up hitting the 886, was about 36. So basically, even the RSI, the relative strength of the trend, was even basically identical as we tested the same sort of level there. After we had the same horizontal structure break, the same diagonal structure break. There's so many things lining up that look so similar to back here. But again, I don't know if they're going to make it that easy. It's very possible that this time it is just a temporary pullback and we end up mooning to the upside and we carry on and have an extended bull market. It's absolutely possible, but I want to see the structure prove that before I dive into that theory too much, right? If we start, like I said, if the 4 hour starts staircasing higher, I am all for following that trend and playing that trend to the upside. And if that sends all the way through all-time highs, so be it. I will gladly trade the upside, especially on altcoins. But I would be very interested in that. looking at the lower time frames, I mean, I was warning about this actually yesterday in my public stream. I had warned that this red box here is obviously that 4-hour swing fail pocket, and I had mentioned that we there is the possibility we end up testing into a swing fail on the 5-minute inside the 4-hour, and that's exactly what we ended up getting. And so far that has been the exact top. Again, so far that can obviously break, being that's a 5-minute chart. I mean, if you would have taken a position on that, obviously you'd be taking, most of your profits by now anyways, because it's a 5-minute, you trade it for what it is. You're not trading a 5-minute and expecting to hold something for days or honestly even hours. You got to be paying yourself based on what kind of time frame you're trading. So, but either way, that move playing out absolutely beautiful so far. In the pro signals this morning, like I said, I had mentioned a lower sell signal. Yeah, right here. We had a lower sell signal on the MDX Trendmaster. Right here we had higher buy signals, higher sell signal, but then we ended up printing a lower buy signal and a lower sell signal. That's often just a warning of a reversal. If, whether or not you want to take a position on that can be used for so many things other than just getting entries, right? And that's something that's important, guys, is that a lot of people just use indicators because they feel like they need to get in as many positions as possible. Honestly, that's a very real thing that most people probably go through, especially at the start of trading, is just thinking that, the more trades you take, the more money you're going to make, kind of a thing. But honestly, I like using these indicators just as equally for taking profits, downsizing risk, avoiding risk altogether. If I was looking at longing here, for example, I would either be looking or at treating this as a double bottom, taking scalp profits very quickly, or ignoring a long altogether at this double bottom here, just because there's a lower sell signal in the trend, right? So just a bit of a warning, and I love having the MDX Trendmaster confluence when I'm choosing a trading direction, basically. That's why right now with this buy signal, I wouldn't take that one all too serious because it's significantly lower. So if anything, I would be looking at waiting for the next lower sell signal, in which case then we would have a new resistance invalidation point, basically. So that's something that's worth mentioning in today's stream, guys, is taking note of anyways, is also using indicators for risk management, and not just getting into positions. Honestly, very important. It can help you a lot. Sometimes the best trade is no trade, right? And I know that's cliche. I know nobody wants to hear it, but honestly, it's true. Waiting for your ideal setup that you've actually back tested, so you have some sort of understanding of your probabilities, so that even if you are wrong on your position, because let's face it, trading, like I said, it's very possible I end up getting stopped out on this short. Trading isn't about winning every single trade. It's also about controlling your losses, because if you can't control your losses or your emotions, it can spiral very quickly. That's why I love trading fibs, honestly, is because they're so structured. Right? I wait for certain structure to form, and then I have my pullback levels for entries, and then I have my entries, my invalidation, my targets. It's all there as long as the structure matches my criteria with structure breaks. At that point, everything is very systematic. Ethereum, Ethereum, for example, even though we only wicked above that lower high, right? We had the very, very similar market structure on Ethereum, right? We had the low, lower low, confirmed lower high. We ended up breaking it just with a wick, and look where we bottomed, right? We pulled back to the 786 absolutely perfectly. First target, second target. You could take this as a third target or wait until you lose something like that. Whatever, but either way, that's just another example, right? So many people want to FOMO long into breakouts, right into those swing fail zones, and so often, even if that is a bullish signal, right, because we took out this level, even if that's a bullish signal, so often it's a signal saying, not necessarily long right now, but look for a long setup right now, kind of a thing, right? And that's where having a systematic fib strategy, for example, then you have your entries, right? Solana, this one I pointed out in my Telegram last night. Actually, it played out relatively quickly, but same thing, right? We had just very basic market structure. We had a high here, higher high here, confirmed higher low, because that's the lowest point between the two. And notice where we come back to. Test the 786 perfectly. Target 1, target 2, and then a reversal. But it hit a couple targets before that reversal. Markets don't just trade one direction. They chop around a lot more sideways, a lot more than they just break out in a single direction. And that's something that a lot of traders struggle with, right? Everyone wants that home run trade. Everyone wants to catch the entire swing. And, you know, for me, it's always play the range first, again, which is why Fibonacci's is great. Play the range first and let the runners run, right? If you can leave half your position or a quarter of your position run as a moon bag, fantastic, right? What do we have on the lower time frames here? So you know what, even right here, so I can see that there was a bearish Stuber continuation here. Unfortunately, I've missed it. I can tell with my eyes that it's played out already. But just look at the same market structure, right? On the very, very micro time frame here, 5 minute, we have our low and we push below that, right? Because we had this little bounce. So there's our confirmed lower high, highest point between the two. Pull a fib from there. Follow the price, look where we end up running into, well, look at both the entries and the targets, right? We pull into 786, 886, absolute perfect Stuber fib setup there. Target 1, target 2. From here, see what happens. You know, if it would end up continuing dumping to the downside like that, well, then you have your runner running. But at least if it reverses from here, you've hit a couple of your targets already, so the risk is off the table at that point. Hype has also been respecting the shit out of them the last couple days, but same thing here. This is one of those examples where, yep, even though the bullish one, it did reverse on us, but it did hit its first couple of targets. 786, 886 entries, 0.5 target, 214 target, then reversal. Then here we end up breaking a downtrend. Here we have our low, lower low, confirmed lower high. We break it, come back down, actually hit 3 entries. Target 1 and target 2 would have been up here, because the 214 is always very similar to the opposite 786. Basically, that's where that 214 number comes from. And just to show you, just to clean things up a little bit, let's pull this bullish one again. Just notice where that 214 target is. It's right at the start of my purple fib box here. So that's where that number comes from. Just basically the opposite one. It's the exact opposite when you have a perfect double bottom or a double top, depending which way you're pulling it. But when the range is the same size, both directions, then yeah, the 214 and the 786 basically overlap perfectly. But then, yeah, obviously, then look where we're getting our rejection. We've already hit the first target. Second target would be down about there. Just to confirm that, let's pull a bearish one. There it is. Just a quick little lesson in Stuber fibs for you there. Aster, still looking pretty good. 4-hour position is risk-free. I just basically have my stop loss a little bit below the higher low structure on the immediate trend here. But this is a setup I was mentioning last week on stream. Is basically, I think we were trading somewhere in this region, and I just mentioned that, yeah, you know, even though Aster is one of the better looking charts out of many of the charts that I've been following recently, I thought it was quite likely that we end up basically retesting the fib. So a lot of you guys will probably remember that I was in a long from down here, basically nailed the bottom. I think it was around 82 cents or something like that. But basically I added to my position because I ended up taking some profits on the way to the upside, but I still had 40% of it running, and I added to my position a little bit at my fibs. So my average entry is now sitting at this purple dotted line, just below 91 cents. let's take a look at the S&P. This is something I have mixed feelings about this one. To be fair, it is totally trading at resistance. However, the S&P has been in a crazy uptrend. So it has had these bearish structure breaks before and invalidated the Stuber fibs on the trend. So it's tough to say if it's going to keep going at this point. Just this uptrend ever since this buy signal has just been absolutely insane. So even the fact that we ended up coming below and losing that purple support line, we are currently have reclaimed it so far. So mixed feelings on that one. We're at resistance from a structure point of view just because we did have this break here, right? This is a bit of a warning shot fired for me just because we had our high, higher high, confirmed higher low. Here's where we had that break. That's where I wait for a pullback. And if this was Bitcoin on a 5-minute chart, I would be looking at shorting something like this basically. But the S&P has been performing a lot stronger than crypto recently, so we'll have to see what happens there. The DXY basically got rejected, a bit of a swing fail from this confirmed lower high on the trend here on the daily chart. So basically my red line here, this is where we set our last lows, right? Low, lower, low. So, and that's the thing, guys, right? Like I said, when structure breaks, you often get that retest on the opposite side of the range. So even though this is a bearish signal, that's where a lot of people would be shorting into that. However, there's often a bullish, I mean, so many of the mentors and so many of the people in the chats know about swing fails at this point. And even though for me, this is still a bit of a red flag, even though it's just a wick, the fact that it's just a wick, there's often, so often, a bullish play to take there, and with a very tight stop loss, a swing fail, right? Just like the opposite of what I'm doing with Bitcoin on the 4-hour right now. But often, even when you get that reversal, it's often just a sign that basically you're getting a bounce, going to retest resistance and carry on to the downtrend. So we'll have to see, because right now, again, we're just getting a swing fail on the opposite side of things there. Gold is a lot like the S&P for me right now. Based on just the structure, this is potential for a top just because of how we lost the structure here. However, much like the S&P, we have seen this happen previously before going parabolic, but it's at least when we get that sort of a structure break, it's quite often that we're going to see some sort of consolidation after. So it's a very strong trend. It's hard to bet against gold when it's in such a parabolic trend. But the fact is that ever since losing that trend, we now have resistance above us. So even if it ends up climbing, I mean, if I was trading gold, I'd be looking at it as more of a short opportunity if we get back up into those resistance levels. But I myself don't trade gold. But like I said, with Bitcoin on the 4-hour, as far as those swing fails, like I said, you know, even if this is going to basically turn into a bullish signal, it's still so often that we see that pullback first, right? So that's where, like I said, even though I played this swing once already and took nice profits there, I'm still willing to, even though I consider it higher risk this time for the second time, I'm still willing to take that position just with a little bit smaller of a position. And like I said, the majority, well, half of my position is actually laddered in higher so that I can actually pull this up so that my average entry will be, you know, more so in the top half or around the middle point of my red box, basically. So keeping my stop loss very tight on that kind of a position. Because again, I do see reasons why the bulls look strong right now. And for me, honestly, the biggest one is probably the trend master right now. That higher trending buy signal, just the fact that it triggered up higher than this previous one here, much like that pro signals, that signal that I posted in pro signals this morning with the lower trending sell signal on Bitcoin on the 5-minute, right? So far, still respecting that. We don't have another here. I'm actually going to clean things up a little bit. Let's actually get rid of everything other than this indicator. And this is where I mentioned that signal basically. We were basically trading down here, I think it was. But yeah, like I said, just noticing which way these signals are trending. So the fact that here, like I said, higher sell signal, lower sell signal, that's my warning that, like I said, there's a, if not even looking to short it, that's at least an opportunity as a warning to not long against that trend. And ever since that, I mean, yeah, obviously if you took that short, then you would be taking profits along the way. I mean, that was a nasty move ever since that retest there. This is just a 5-minute chart, but that was a couple percent move. So, I mean, with some leverage on something like that, I mean, that was a very nice trade. This buy signal, don't really consider it much of anything just because it is significantly lower. Like I said, if we end up getting a lower sell signal, I will take that much more serious than the buy signal. But basically right now, we would have to basically break above 93.6K. If we can do that and invalidate this trend on the 5-minute with the MDX Trendmaster, then I will be open to the idea that we are going to take another run at my 115 resistance at about 95K. But basically, I want to see at least a break of this kind of downtrend. So, I mean, an even better case for Bitcoin and a stronger argument for the bulls, basically, would be if we end up printing a lower sell signal here and then quickly end up printing a higher buy signal, for example. Basically, if this was our pivot from the next sell signal, let's just pretend, as we end up breaking that level, that's a beautiful sign that the downtrend would be breaking. Much like right here, for example. So I guess technically this buy was slightly lower, but let's just say from here's where we had our higher buy signal, and notice what happens when we end up breaking that, right? When we invalidate that, even though we got a bounce, that was the start of a nasty downtrend move. So if you started laddering into a short on the climb there, then you'd be sitting in a juicy profit, right? Or another way to look at it, this is actually how I use this indicator as confluence as well for Stuber fibs, is the fact that here we have a lower sell signal. This is that resistance that I was warning you guys about basically this morning. And if you just basically chase the chart, as the chart structure changes, just keep pulling your fib with it. And notice when we get it here, all of a sudden, eventually we end up retesting the Stuber fibs. And boom, beautiful short entry right there. Beautiful way to catch a continuation of the trend. Another way I like to look for them, I like to use the Algo Master and see what it's pointing out for the auto fibs, right? If we go down to fib type, there is auto fib levels and Stuber fibs are there. So you can see I actually do agree with this one that it has pulled right now. The fact that we have this low, we broke it. So we have our low, our lower low, our confirmed lower high. We have broke that level. So at this point, I would actually be interested in taking a bit of a hedge long and taking some profits off my short if we come down to this level. So the Algo Master with the auto fibs, I don't always agree with them. I would never rely on them and look at them and say, oh yeah, I'm taking that trade for sure. I always make sure that I agree with the fib pull, because for me, it's always market structure first and then indicator confluence second. So I use it more as a second set of eyes, or at least, sometimes I'll bring it up just to see if it draws my attention to anything, much like this one. But I would make sure that I do agree with it. And like I said, I double check the structure here. I agree with it. Yep, you know what? It checks my boxes for the structure wise. Yeah, I would pull a fib that same way. I'd be pulling from this bottom here to the high. And if we end up trending higher, I would just continue chasing the price until we end up testing the 786, 886 basically. But at this point, this is how that range looks. So I do agree with the Algo Master in this case. So it's always nice to have AI agreeing with you as confluence. So yeah, I don't know. As far as right now, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable taking a long at this point, just because I think it's more likely that we end up testing support down here, and that would also give you a tighter invalidation. And yeah, at this point, I would rather, even if we ended up climbing from here, I'd rather just miss that move completely and just wait for new structure. Because all we would have to do is, let me just take off this indicator here. Let me also take off this one. But basically, here's how our structure looks. Also, here's another reason why I would not be bullish right now, basically, is because even on the micro trend, we do technically have this little structure break here. It is micro, but technically we did lose that immediate uptrend. So if anything, you know, we could start looking for a mini bearish one. I actually had that pulled at the start of the stream. I don't know if any of you noticed, but we never did quite end up hitting that level. But that's still valid because the structure hasn't changed yet. But I could see us ending up coming down and retesting support. What else? You know what? Actually, I want to check out, before I dive into that at all, I want to check out the long short ratio. Haven't looked at that today yet. So I'm just going to get rid of that one because they're basically the same. I mean, shorts basically flatlined a little bit. I mean, it still looks like they're climbing, right? As long as retail shorts are climbing, I think the rally will continue. That would be the rocket fuel we need to continue climbing higher. But if retail very quickly gets FOMO, which does happen, as soon as they get FOMO and start longing into resistance levels again, that is where we will see the downtrend likely continue. But we'll have to see what happens with that. Botmaster, should we check out a couple things? I don't know if everyone has access to this or just Ultimate members or people who have signed up for it or what. But pretty cool, you guys. Just kind of started getting familiar with it a little bit. But yeah, very cool. Some of the blueprints we can check out here. But this is the first one that I set up, actually. We can just click on the blueprint and it'll automatically pull this up. And guys, this, like, even if you don't do the automation, I mean, this is, you can technically use these as your own indicator as well. You can see here it would have triggered a buy signal basically right here. Hit a couple take profits already, so playing out beautifully. One that caught my eye earlier today is I noticed this was a scalper. So, and I see that it hasn't been available all too long, so only about 30 days, 35%. So I wanted to check that guy out. Click on the blueprint, see how this goes. I assume there's signals all over the place, but it is absolutely killing it apparently. Yep, just a scalping machine. So I'm very excited to play more with this Botmaster. I'm pretty excited to test out that product a little more. How many of you guys in the chat, how many of you guys have been checking out the Botmaster so far? Fully testing it now? I only threw in a test amount so far. I wanted to make sure things are executing properly and that I set everything up properly. But yeah, this weekend I'm planning to add some in and definitely start up a few extra bots. In the midst of setting up your first bot. Nice. Well, I struggle with setting things up. And I think I was able to do it first attempt. Well, so far it seems like everything's working perfectly. So if I can do it, you guys can do it. I'm scared of change. Automation's terrifying. But you know what? Gonna try it out. Some pretty pretty crazy stats as far as automation goes. I mean, looking at the last 180 days, these are some nice profits, nice win rates. Just disciplined, structured, systematic trade strategies, just taking profits along the way. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, guys. Actually, I will still be here with you guys. I'm just gonna wrap up my live stream so that I can, start uploading stuff and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that's about mostly what I wanted to go over today. So hopefully you guys found this stream useful. For those of you who do enjoy how I approach these markets purely based on chart structure, check out my new YouTube channel, the Crypto Trading channel, where I do shorter live stream pretty much every day, doing daily, quick daily updates basically. So yeah, if you do appreciate how I just look at chart structure and trade the charts for what they are, do yourselves a favor, check out that YouTube channel where I am almost every day. With that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Peace.